Sabbat Witch, or Sanoba Witch, is my first ever Yuzu visual novel that I've gotten the opportunity to jump into, and it's a very popular title in their lineup. Originally developed and released in Japan in 2015, brought to the West by Nekonyan in 2018, and re-released in Japan in 2023, this title presents a bunch of wacky moments, some cool ideas for a story, romance and comedic moments, and a really fun cast of characters. I jumped into this one back in July, and slowly spent the last half of the year enjoying this surprisingly cozy atmosphere that the visual novel provides. But that's not all that it provides, as from the key art of this title, you could probably tell that this shit gets into some weird areas that you would probably be able to catch on Now That's What I Call Horny. As I said, there's some wacky stuff going on throughout the long journey of Sabbat Witch, and I'd like to share with you all a bit of my thoughts from my first ever trip through a Yuzu title, and why I can absolutely recommend a visual novel that has this for its cover art, while also saying that it's a cozy time. So let's get the obvious one out of the way. The character that has her melons out with such a bizarre outfit is our main heroine, Ayachi Nene, who is a witch. Our main protagonist, Hoshina Shuuji, comes across her one day in the library after accepting a favor from his classmate to watch over it in her stead. You see, Shuuji willingly accepts favors and such because he wants to limit interactions with people as much as possible without getting a negative emotion out of them, and that is because of his hidden ability. Shuuji is able to sense or perceive the emotions of other people, and this can sometimes be overwhelming as he has no control over this. In order to not be beaten up by negative emotions shoving awful feelings his way, he keeps things short with his classmates and avoids evoking negative emotions from them. And that's how he got stuck watching over the library for someone despite having no interest in doing so. Ayachi Nene comes to the library under the impression that no one was there, and does something no one could have expected. She just straight up starts pleasuring herself as if she didn't have a say in the matter. Now obviously, most wouldn't expect anyone to do this sort of stuff in a school library or anywhere public, but Ayachi Nene is a very popular student that is heavily liked and relied on. She's basically seen as the perfect student in class, so her doing this is just shocking. Shuuji gets caught trying to stay hidden during this crazy situation, and we get the information dump that we need for the story. Nene went through with a contract to have a wish of hers come true, and that cursed her in return. She now gets sudden urges to masturbate, and they can pop up at any time. Along with this, she is now a witch who must take the strong emotions of people in the form of feathery fragments in order to complete her contract. And she does this with a gun and a very bizarre outfit. However, Shuuji accidentally steals all of the fragments that she has collected so far, putting her back at the starting line. We find out that Shuuji suffers from a hole in his heart that stems from his hidden ability pushing him away from people for such a long time and growing up without his mother. He feels as if he doesn't have a purpose and doesn't know what to do with his life. So these two team up in order for Shuuji to find a way to close the hole in his heart and push the fragments that he stole from Nene back into her possession. He joins her club, the Occult Club, or OC, which mainly has students coming by asking for help with various situations. When they're successfully helped out, that can give Nene the opportunity to take some fragments from them. So through ridiculous odds, Shuuji is given the opportunity to actually do something with his young high school life, and that is helping a witch and in turn himself. Through the common route, we meet the other heroines of the story. We first meet Inaba Meguru, a first-year student who joins the club after being helped out with her problem of wanting to be more popular in her class. We then come across a transfer student for our class, Shiba Tsumugi, who has some sort of issue that forces her to dress like a guy. Through some detective work, we find out that she is also a witch, and that is her curse, and she eventually joins the OC as well. And finally, we have the exiting student council president of Togokushi Toko, who struggled with finding someone to fill her role before she offered the rest of her high school free time to the OC. There's also our best friend character Kaido Hideaki, and another friend from class, Kariya Wakana. We also have the contractors for Nene and Tsumugi, a student that looks up to Toko, our teacher, and Shuji's dad, who, guys, honestly, that guy is just so great. He is such an awesome supporting character. I love that guy. These supporting characters get a pretty good amount of attention, with some having reasonable impacts and routes. So ever since the incident with Ayachi Nene, Shuuji's life was thrown upside down, and what's nuts is that this ridiculous meeting with her led to him making more friends and helping more people out of a desire to help rather than to avoid their negative emotions. At the Common Route's conclusion at a Halloween party that the OC puts together, we've already had many moments with these characters that show how much Shuuji has jumped out of his shell from how we were initially introduced to him. So let's take it further and jump into the character routes. There's a route for each of the characters in the OC, plus a short bonus route with Wakana after completing at least one of the 4 main routes. Choices you make during the common route will get you into a route after the party, or the bad ending if you're stupid like me, and you'll be well on your way for hours of Shuuji getting closer to someone. Each route has the same goals, excluding Wakana's. Get with the girl, solve her problem, and fill the hole in Shuuji's heart somehow, which usually involves fully jumping over all the hurdles in whatever the route's story has. Sometimes these goals are connected, but it's typically the same idea with each route. What's cool is that each route gives you chunks of information on things, such as how this whole witch situation functions, what happened in Shuuji's past, what went down with his parents, etc. And there's some really surprising moments where you learn some stuff unexpectedly through connections you would not have guessed, but there's also stuff that you can expect from a mile away. In my first go around in the game, I chose my options randomly, and that got me into Toko's route. The choices aren't super random for getting the points needed to enter a route, as there's always conversations or scenes that pop up with a character that gets you closer to them. So my choices in my first go around got me closest to Toko, and I didn't even realize it initially. Her route was interesting and full of surprises, but slow since it starts out with Shuuji trying to get with her. Her issue with finding a replacement for the role of student council president was already solved in the common route, so you gotta wonder what will pop up in her route. And it did take some time to get somewhere in this one, but once shit hits, goddamn do they hit in this route. After this, I started using a guide to for sure get into a route that I'm aiming for and to see all the responses through the 10 or so choices that you get to make in the common route. I went for Wakana's route next, which again is a short bonus route. And you know what? It was such a good fucking route that was only hindered by being too damn short. Wakana is a great character, but there wasn't much to learn about with her. The only problem to solve here was getting ready for the performance at the party and a different string of events. And once they got together, that was it. I was so bummed out with how it wasn't a full route with more going on. Next up, I went for Meguru. I was initially excited for her route, but once I got halfway through it, man, I was tired of it. Her constantly calling Shuuji a pervert in the typical funny haha anime fashion gets so old so fast. The issues that needed solving were interesting here, but afterwards, everything was predictable and nothing was really going on in my opinion. I was so disappointed with how this route turned out because I was a fan of the OC shenanigans when it was just Shuuji, Nene, and Meguru. No amount of them playing Monster Hunter was gonna fix this one. So after finally finishing that route, I had the 2 witches left, and since Nene was the main heroine, I decided to keep her for last. So we go for the other witch, Tsumugi. I didn't really care for her much in the common route, about the same with Toko honestly, but I kinda enjoyed what her route had to offer. Her issue was obvious, solving it was easier said than done, and there were some other things popping up that were related to the one that she's contracted with. We got to learn some interesting witch contracting mechanics here, but I would say that this was somewhat as exciting as Toko's route at the end of the day. And finally, we have the main woman herself, Ayachi Nene. My expectations were high for her character development and her route at this point, and goddamn were my expectations met. So at this point, I had already learned a bunch in terms of how the witch mechanics work, with the whole idea behind a wish having some sort of negative effect until enough fragments are collected, but the idea of magic was such a mysterious concept. It's brought up in every route in some way and used differently, and everything just kind of works with it in whatever way is most convenient. I did not expect how magic was set to be used here, along with the overall direction this route took. It still accomplishes the same goals as the other routes, but takes things a step further to make this route stand out from the rest. A part of me was beginning to think that this would be similar to other routes, but man, not even close. Also, holy shit was this route horny. I mean, it makes sense given that it's Nene with her, circumstances and all that, but still, I just had to bring that up. Horniness aside, this route accomplishes so much, and it was the perfect way to wrap up my time with this title. So about 35 to 40 hours later, I made it to the end of my first Yuzu-soft visual novel, and I gotta say that it was a bunch of fun. Sabbat Witch makes it obvious early on that it's not meant to be taken as an overly serious title, but still has some moments that introduce a more serious tone. At the end of the day, this is a rom-com visual novel with heavy emphasis on romance with reliance on comedy, but when it's time for the story to ramp up, it does a solid job. And despite the cringy and slow moments that plague the routes of this visual novel, I think it accomplished everything it set out to do very well. I was happy with my route order, and I do have to join in on suggesting that Ayachi Nene's route is best done last. It wasn't necessary to have more knowledge on specific things like Shuuji's past, his parents, witch mechanics, etc., but it was nice knowing that in the main heroine's route. I felt more prepared for whatever crazy shit was bound to get thrown at me, but I also appreciate that you can really tackle this one in whichever order you want, or to just read the routes of characters you're interested in. But I'll also say this, Nene's ending felt so great because I had gone through everyone's stories beforehand. Still your call on how you want to approach the routes though. The characters and how much you get interested in them in the common route really pushes that motivation for getting through their respective routes. Honestly, I was a huge fan of the dynamic that Nene, Meguru, and Shuuji all had early on. It really reminded me of the main cast in Origairu, where everyone has completely different personalities, goals, and an overall outlook on life. Nene is seen as that perfect person when she's definitely not, though she is kind and dependable. Meguru is shy but willing to be outgoing once she properly finds her place among her class and friends. Shuuji is... well, he's the one that's going with the flow and trying to find what will fill the hole in his heart. These characters clash in the best of ways, and seeing them work together was a bunch of fun. Tsumigi joining the OC felt awkward, and I didn't really ever have much interest in her character early on. Toko, I don't really know how to describe her or my feelings about her. Her moments in the common route were fine, but when she joined the OC, it felt forced. Even after her route, I still feel like her character fits oddly into everything, though I thought her story and what she provided was all very entertaining. Nonetheless, I enjoyed this cast of characters overall. I wanted Meguru to be my favorite because of how well she worked around everyone in the beginning, but her route soured my opinion of her. If I had to choose a favorite, it would be Ayachi Nene, though Wakana would have been my favorite if she was given a full-on route. But I want to talk about Shuuji briefly. He sucks. Really awful protagonist that we have to follow. Like, I understand that he has a plot-related reason for being boring and not all that fun to follow throughout the story, but despite him getting to know more people and growing from more experiences, he still just kinda sucks all the way to the end. In the rare CGs where we actually see his eyes, I'm reminded that he's a real developing character in the story. For example, there's a CG that shows a photo of him in Nene's route, and you can clearly see his expression. I wanted more of that. I love seeing how far our cast of characters have come, and I wanted to see more of our protagonist's growth specifically. Maybe that would have made me like him more? I don't know. At the end of the day, I just saw him as another hentai main character since those CGs were hiding his eyes. Moving on, let's talk about various things about Sabbat Witch. I am a big fan of how this visual novel looks. All the characters have distinct designs, and the CGs are so great. And that's why I'm a little disappointed that there weren't more CGs. There's a lot of moments that don't even have chibi art, and I felt like that was a missed opportunity for showing off cute moments between Shuuji and whoever he was with in a route. We get a lot of CGs for the sex, but that's a given. There's a small amount of action, such as near the end of Tsumigi's route, and I felt that would have greatly made that moment a whole lot better. You know, more visuals for the visual novel. However, there's a good trade-off here, in my opinion. The sprites for the characters are stupidly expressive. The idea of using so many expression changes while a character is talking sounds simple, but it adds so much. From happy, to flustered, to considering suicide due to utter embarrassment at being seen masturbating in the library, the characters just feel so much more alive. The soundtrack was fine, nothing that stood out, but some tracks got annoying to listen to after hearing them almost every other scene for 40 hours. Also, the world isn't all that big, so you've really gone to most available locations after a route or two. You also get an idea of how this visual novel operates after the same amount of time. These aren't complaints, but it's definitely a pretty contained setting and experience, and since it stood out to me, I thought I should bring it up here. Everything read perfectly fine. This was also my first visual novel with Nekunyan being behind the localization, and I think everything worked out pretty well here. I obviously can't comment on the translation, but I didn't come across any glaring problems or inconsistencies in what I was reading. And of course, we do have the H scenes. There's a lot for this title in my opinion, and they really are just your standard H scenes. It's expected that this title would have them, so I'm not disappointed that they're here. Hell, the main heroine is cursed with random moments where she just has to pleasure herself. I expected things to get freaky here. But similarly to what I said earlier with the setting and overall experience, once you go through a few H scenes, the rest are more or less the same. I'm not a big H scene goer or anything, but look, they're here, there's choices in most of them, the choices are downright funny at times, Nene has most of the H scenes, and some of them do get crazy. If H scenes are what you're looking for in a visual novel, then hoo boy do I have some good news for you. Finally, the user experience is actually really nice for a visual novel here. No shortage of settings, no bugs of any sort except for whatever the hell this was near the end of Nene's route, and it runs great on Steam Deck. It's easy to patch as well. I will say that the only downside on Steam Deck is that it won't play videos or the animation that pops up when fragments are being collected, but honestly the lack of these don't hinder the experience in my opinion. So whether you're playing on PC or Steam Deck, you're in for a good time. The majority of my time with Sabbat of the Witch was on Steam Deck, and I even brought it with me on my trip to Las Vegas. Definitely got some weird looks from friends, but yeah, it was great. And there we have it. Sabbat of the Witch, or Sanoba Witch, really lived up to the popularity that it's had for quite a while. It's genuinely funny, charming at times, straight up fucking odd at other times, and an overall fun journey with a wacky cast of characters. I do wish things went a bit deeper involving the ideas that were brought up, but overall everything was done just fine, and I can walk away from this title satisfied. I really stretched my time with this visual novel out, which made it all the more bittersweet to view Nene's ending, the epilogue that followed, and to close out of the game for one final time. Magic and witches are fun concepts, and Sabbat of the Witch had an interesting spin on them. I absolutely recommend this title to anyone looking for a simple romantic visual novel that doesn't get too deep on the major plot points, because that's really what you'll get here, along with a lot of sex. Thank you all for watching my review of Sabbat of the Witch, or Sanoba Witch. This is only my third attempt at reviewing a visual novel in this format, but it's been a fun challenge. I hope to continue reviewing more titles as I experiment with different ways of doing so, and I hope you all will tune in to whatever I have up my sleeve. Thank you to my big supporters of Overcodex, Jamie11577, Ryan Dunn, Repoggers, and everyone else who supports me on Patreon and through a YouTube membership. Thank you to everyone again for tuning into this video, and I hope to see you all in another one. Take it easy.